Let's bring them here again. Josh and Elyse, come on up.
Hi, everyone.
Hello. You probably have a lot of questions, so I think I'm just going to start with one, and then we'll throw it out. And most of us probably know this, but just tell me very briefly who got access? You worked with Anthony, right?
Yeah, so I met Anthony when I worked in politics. I was his chief of staff for a couple of years when he was in Congress. And then I left politics and moved into filmmaking, and Elyse and I started working together. And he and I stayed in touch over the years. And then when he got caught up in this scandal and resigned, Elyse and I were talking about the possibility of telling his story. And so I started talking to him about that, and we batted around the idea of doing a documentary. Was
that before he decided to run for mayor?
Yeah, so that was basically right after he resigned, this conversation started, and it really continued over the course of a couple years of going back and forth and trying to see if he might be open to it. And then ultimately, it seemed like he really was not going to go for it, that he didn't want to do it. And we were disappointed, but okay. And then on the morning that he announced he was running for mayor, I got a text at around 6 in the morning from him saying, "I'm in. Do you want to come to my apartment? I'm here, hold up all day with my staff, and bring a camera." And I said, "Okay, I'll be right over." And really just ran on over and texted Elyse on the way, "Oh my God," and then we started shooting. So it was really, as you saw, just shooting the whole way through, from the day he announced all the way to the end.
All right, so let's, because I'm imagining there are a lot of questions, but maybe there aren't. Yeah, right there. If you can speak up, please, so we can hear you.
Incredible piece of work. The fact that you see so many places 10 inches from his face, I just can't imagine how you did it.
So,
How did you do it? Why didn't he stop you?
yeah, so why didn't he stop you? Because he already said yes, I guess, but was there a point, and the question is how, and you're also so, have real access so close up.
Yeah.
And there must have been a point where he was really kind of sorry he said yes.
Well, that's a really good question. And as you guys saw in the end of the film, it's a question that we posed directly to Anthony, and it was something we were wondering about as well. And at the end, he gives us an answer where he says that he wanted to be viewed as the full person that he was and not as just a punchline. And I think that, that was our intention with this film as well, to show a different side to Anthony than you hadn't seen before, a more complex, nuanced portrait. I mean, he had just been, after his sexting scandal, he had just been reduced to a caricature and a punchline, and our hope was something more complex would come through. I mean, it's been said, I think, that those that are the most exposed are often the least revealed. And I think that was certainly the case with Anthony, and that was one of our intentions with the film, and I think that was in part his reasoning, but Josh can also talk about continuing.
It's a little counterintuitive, I think, in a sense. I mean, the assumption is that when things went south, that he would want us to stop shooting. But I think, in a certain way, this motivation to have a different version of his story told, one that would, capture kind of the full picture, and I think that motivation kind of intensified for him when the scandal broke, when the scandal came back and it looked like it might overshadow everything and everything would become, just all about the scandal all over again. I think in some sense it became almost more important that there was a camera in the room documenting, everything else that was going on as well.
And there were moments that he asked Josh to stop filming. I think you saw that, so.
Yes, right here. So this is a question about Uma and her not speaking to you very much, and was that their choice, your choice?
I mean, she's more reserved and quiet than Anthony. She's a more reserved and quiet person than Anthony, and what you see in the film is what we got from her, and the little bit that you have, it's not as much as him. The access was really with Anthony, and Josh had that relationship, and we were following that along the way. But I think that she, even though she is more quiet, she was also judged and ridiculed just like he was. And I do think there was a sense that she wanted another story told as well, something a little bit more complete, you know, to see her as a full person, a wife, a mom, someone with a really important job. So you get a glimpse of someone beyond just that caricature.
Yes.
Yeah.
The first question about the campaign manager, if she did walk away at one point, because you don't see her at the end, and the other is your comments and observations about this crazy political campaign that's going on now.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. First of all, Barbara Morgan did stay on the campaign through to the end, so she never left. This question about the current political cycle is a very interesting one, and we do, I think, want this film to be a part of the conversation, beyond just Anthony's story and this one campaign and this New York story. We do think that, it is interesting to get this kind of front row seat to kind of what our politics has become and how much, as you say, it is now, the conversation really is driven by, this appetite for spectacle and this impulse toward entertainment. And you see that play out, of course, in the course of Anthony's campaign and the way everything is overtaken by the scandal. And you also see it in the current presidential campaign in a figure like Donald Trump, right? Who I think very clearly a lot can be said about him, but one thing I think a lot of us can agree on is that he's someone who understands how to use spectacle to raise his profile. I think actually, I read in the New York Times the other day that he has something like $2 billion worth of earned media so far, which is, record-breaking by a lot. It's by far more than any candidate in American political history. I mean, this is someone who understands that in order to have a voice in the conversation, you have to figure out how to put on a show, essentially. And so, yeah, I mean, I think we do see the parallels, certainly, between this story, and we're excited for our film to be, hopefully, part of the conversation.
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right, what Josh was saying, and what you brought up. We worked on this, and we didn't know exactly when it would come out, but we're so excited that it is coming out right now, because we do think it could have something important to say about how our media and politics is. I mean, the parallels between Anthony and Trump, they're there. I do think that Anthony, both personally and politically, is very different, but in the same way that Trump knows how to get attention by being brash and having this air of authenticity. Anthony understood that as well, and I think it says something about our politics that in order to be a politician today, you have to create a spectacle.
In the back, in the middle, yeah. So in all your dealings with him, do you think there's any way he could have been elected mayor?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think he was leading in the polls, and so I think New Yorkers seem to think that he maybe deserved to be mayor pretty clearly, I think. And it's an interesting question. Had this scandal not broken a second time, what would have happened? And of course, we don't know. But obviously, he had qualities that were really resonated with New Yorkers. He was, I think, as you saw, he was very smart. He was very hardworking. He was, a really, in many ways, he had incredible political talents, and still does in some ways. So yeah, I think that certainly could have gone that way.
I think even he or somebody on his staff said at one point, if there had been 10 more weeks, he could have possibly, gotten back. He did seem to fall off the rails, though, a bit, after it broke again. Yes?
Yeah, was there any discussion of him considering doing preemptive damage control before this came out?
Was there any discussion with him? With Weiner of doing damage control before the film came out?
No.
Oh,
No.
buying off the girl? No. Like buying off the girl or anything? No.
Not that we know of.
No.
Yes.
I was wondering what the reaction of Anthony and you have been to the film. Have you seen it? And also, what are their lives like, post the film?
So have they seen the film?
So they haven't actually seen it yet. We offered to show it to them months ago, actually, before it was totally finished, and they didn't want to see it. So it's an open invitation, and they're certainly welcome to see it whenever they want. They're married. they live in an apartment in Manhattan, and they're raising their son together.
He's like a commentator on New York
Yeah.
One, isn't he, still,
Yeah,
I think?
you saw a couple clips at the end there. He's a pretty regular pundit on New York One and goes on various shows periodically, and I think he has a column in the Daily News and has a consulting business, so.
And whom is obviously still working for Hillary Clinton right now.
Yes. I'm sorry, could you speak up a little? Do you think this film could have an impact on Hillary's campaign?
I mean, the answer is we don't know how it's going to play out, but we have no control over how Secretary Clinton's opponents or others will choose to utilize this film. But as Josh and I were saying, we really hope that this film can be seen as a film about what our politics has become and how it's driven by entertainment, and just tweets and sound bites and one-liners become the way of talking about political news coverage. These easy narratives become the main focus right now in our politics. And I guess we really think this film is more about Trump than Hillary, and hope it can be a part of the conversation.
Yes. Yes, they do have distribution. Tell us about distribution.
Yes, we do. Sundance Selects has picked up the film and is putting it in theaters. Opens here in New York on May 20th and in LA. And then it will be on Showtime in October. Thank you.
Yes. Right there in the middle. Was there anything too sensitive that they cut out of the film? Is that the question?
No.
We tried to use.
I can't imagine.
Tried to put in the most dramatic material that we could to tell the story. To have.
I mean, we had something like 400 hours, so there was a lot that ended up on the cutting room floor. But no, I mean, we of course preserved the story and told it in the best way we could.
Yes. Oh, so now you're experts on this.
No, I know what you're talking about.
Let's talk about Ted Cruz and the National Enquirer.
Well, yeah, I was thinking, like, I don't think these things surprise us anymore, but it goes to show that we hope our film will always be timely. Right?
And yes, I think it will. Yes. So this viewer says that, and she hopes you take this as a compliment, that the people she was most angry at were like Stewart and Colbert, and even yourself for like wallowing in the scandal.
I take that at the highest compliment. I do.
Because it tells us a lot.
I mean, that's something that was our intention with the film, to show the way in which we all participate in the spectacle of politics and in entertainment and as storytellers. And I think we wanted to show the complexity in the situation with all the players, and the media is one of them. We're one of them. So that's something we were going for with the film. So yes, that's why it's a compliment.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your comment too.
Yeah.
And I obviously we did want to acknowledge, of course, the humor that and the field day that the press and especially the comedians had with it, without piling on. And so it was a little bit of a tricky line to walk, I think, in the construction of the story. But it's good to hear that's your reaction.
Because there's a lot more of that than we saw in this film, I'm sure. Yes. The second question is, how long did it take to edit? And he's an insider. And
Ken?
and how did you do this fly on the wall thing, which of course, according to Anthony, wasn't always fly on the wall?
It's a good process question.
Yeah, I mean, we actually started with, as I said, on that first day when I ran over there, I actually grabbed Sean McGing, who is up in the corner there, who is an excellent cinematographer. So some of those first days and weeks, really, I was filming with Sean, and then it became pretty clear pretty quick that there wasn't a lot of room. I mean, as you're saying, it was really a very, our footprint just could not be that big, and so it really just ended up being enough room for myself. And so I had to pick up the camera and, in some ways, learn how to shoot. Our editor likes to joke
it gets better as it goes along.
that the footage improves dramatically as you get from the beginning to the end. But Sean did continue to help filming throughout. There were some scenes there where we had multiple people. Election day is one of them. But yeah, it was basically just me with a camera.
And yeah, and then afterwards, we finished. We sat with the 400 hours of footage for about 2.5 years, really transcribing, going through it, talking about story, working, and then working with an editor who brought, his fresh eyes to it. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah. I mean, the edit was about a year or so.
Yeah.
That's, let me see, yeah, in the stripe. So this is a question about the first scene, him in Congress, and how, which obviously made you want to work for him, and also has those qualities of his that sort of helped in his downfall. Talk about using that material and the choice of where to place it.
I mean, in terms of the timing, it's actually interesting. I worked for him before a lot of that stuff. Him yelling on the floor of the Congress and sort of some of his antics on cable news, going toe-to-toe with some conservatives. A lot of that actually came after I worked for him, and he had a real rise in prominence and in stature through a lot of those sorts of things. And this speaks to some of what Elyse was saying before in terms of kind of the politics of spectacle as they are today. Anthony was really pretty talented. I mean, he was really spectacularly good at sort of pulling the lever, and he would be the first to admit this, kind of pulling the levers of the media, modern media, in a way that amplified his voice and successfully made him part of the conversation in the service of his agenda. And so, that was, it was those YouTube moments, right? It's that video you saw at the beginning really went viral. A lot of the, he was sort of famous for going toe-to-toe with Bill O'Reilly and Megyn Kelly in ways that were just really entertaining and really resonated with the progressive left in a way that made him famous. And that was really setting him up to be actually the next mayor. I mean, that was really his ambition. I don't know if that answered your question, but that's sort of the history.
Yeah. I think that in terms of seeing the same things that made him successful also contributed to his downfall. I mean, we talked about that as well. I think that, and I think you can see it in not only in the beginning, but throughout the film, where he's got such self-awareness and such insight, and then such blindness. And I think that just played out a lot, and kind of hubris about it.
That moment in the beginning where he's yelling at Peter King, right? I mean, that really was a sort of turning point for him in terms of his popularity, and it was totally unplanned. I mean, I think that's part of why it resonated so much, is because it felt authentic, and it really was. He was telling me about it later, that he just went up there to kind of give whatever the response was to the conservative side, and he had no expectation or plan of doing that. He just was angry. So, as Elyse is saying, there's a kind of like the flip side. The same things that I think made him successful initially, ultimately were problematic for him down the line.
Yes.
So one of the criticisms of Anthony Weiner was that he's narcissistic, and you chose to put in a number of shots of him seeming to really get a kick out of watching himself on TV. And I'm curious if at the end of it all, did you feel like he's especially narcissistic, or is he doing a normal job of being a politician?
Is he particularly narcissistic or just normally narcissistic?
It's funny, some people...
That's my interpretation of that question.
I think it's a really good question, and I don't know that we know exactly the answer. Obviously, there's an element of narcissism in all of politicians, and he actually, he says that. Politicians are wired in some way to need attention. A lot of people who've seen this, we've shown this film now to a few audiences. And the range of reactions is really, it's a little bit gratifying. Some people are saying, oh, wow, he's so much more complicated than I thought. And then the next person that we talk to says, wow, he's exactly as narcissistic as I thought, right? And so there's this, I think it speaks to what we were hoping to do with the film, which is to convey the complexity of his character.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, what we wanted to do, and it speaks to our culture, is that just the way in which you can just watch yourself and this sort of selfie culture and our narcissistic culture that we might be in, and his story can be emblematic in that way. And I think stylistically going into this, one of the things that was important for us with the film is to sort of show the public story of Anthony, and then flip behind the curtain and see him either watching it and what was really happening, and that interesting dynamic of as it plays out and then what happens, behind. So that was one of the reasons, that we had that ability, that you could sit with a character after something happens and what it's really like for them.
Yes. Did you ever, consider doing the thousands of people do the same that he did, and also talk about covering Sydney Leathers?
There was a decision early on that we were going to stick with Anthony and be with him as events unfolded. We really wanted to have it be a character-driven vérité documentary as much as possible, so that you're having just his point of view through events, and not broadening it to talk to others. And same thing in terms of, you see Sydney, but she's not a central character. You see it through, a little bit more from his point of view.
Well, we just got the hook, so that's all we have time for. We have another thing.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
You have one more.
Oh, yeah.